breaking down every game, every day in Major League Baseball. This is the Baseball Betting Show. Here is your host, Greg Peterson.
A warm and friendly hello. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for the Baseball Betting Show with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an incredible podcast for you. We only have two parts to this podcast today because the Milwaukee Brewers could not do their part. They lost their game against the LA Dodgers, so we do not have any games that are going to be going down on Saturday. Do not worry. In terms of the Sunday games, we are going to get you guys picks and breakdowns and analysis for the game number 6 between the Seattle Mariners and the Toronto Blue Jays. And I'll be trying to keep this podcast going, by the way, daily as much as humanly possible. I might take a day or two off if we have a long lull between the Championship Series and the World Series, but I'm with you guys every single step of the way, and we're going to recap everything that we saw in baseball on Friday here in segment number 1, and then in a few minutes, we're going to be joined by Tanner Kern. He does such an amazing job over at DraftKings. We're going to be chatting with him about if any team can slow down the LA Dodgers. Who would the Dodgers rather see, the Seattle Mariners or the Toronto Blue Jays? We'll be talking about the dynamics of the ALCS as well. So we've got a lot of fun ahead. If you do like hearing from this fine podcast, Baseball Betting Show, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. And if you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of two ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters EM, name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. The other way is via an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. While I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today, everything is powered by EdgeBoost. EdgeBoost is making sure that bettors are able to have access to their funds whenever and wherever with EdgeBoost. 100% of gambling transactions do get approved, and when you go to edgeboost.bet, make sure you put in that promo code of Greg, G-R-E-G. That'll get you $1 for $1 match on your first deposit up to $25. Now let's take a look back at everything that we saw in baseball on Friday. Tried to find some trends and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
It looked like the Mariners might be going down 3-2 to the Blue Jays, but the first 5 hitters that come to the plate for the Mariners in the 8th inning all score 6-2. The Mariners get the job done as Kevin Gausman, a really nice start here for the Blue Jays, 5 2/3 innings. He allowed a solo home run as he was taken deep by Eugenio Suarez in the 2nd inning. That was his 2nd of the postseason. I believe his 51st of the overall season. From there, Louis Varland, 4 outs out of the bullpen scoreless, and Bryce Miller on the flip side for the Mariners. Not a ton of length, but, considering he was the number 5 starter for this postseason, rock solid here. 1 run allowed in 4 innings. From there, Matt Brash, he lends a scoreless inning. Brian Wu said woohoo to finally getting on the mound. He gives up 1 run in 2 innings. Gabe Speier, Andres Munoz lend scoreless 8th and 9th innings. And for the Blue Jays, the men that came out of the bullpen in the 8th inning were the problem. Brandon Little, boy, did he come up little. He walked a pair of guys, and he gave up 1 hit. That 1 hit was a Cal Raleigh solo home run. Raleigh's 4th of the postseason, 64th of the season. Then, with inherited runners on base, Sir Anthony Dominguez, he gives up a grand slam to Eugenio Suarez for Suarez, his 3rd of the postseason, and that is overwhelming in this series, as now the over in this series is 4-1, and the road teams are 4-1 on the money line as well. So has been a nice wackadoo fun series out there. And then for the LA Dodgers, they dispatched the Milwaukee Brewers. They get the sweep, doing it with Shohei Ohtani putting on one of the greatest performances that not only are you going to see in the baseball postseason, in my opinion, this was one of the greatest sports performances that we have ever seen in any playoff in any sport ever. 3 home runs for Shohei Ohtani. Home runs number 3, 4, and 5 of the postseason. Oh yeah, and then he threw 6 scoreless innings on the mound as well. Just absolutely incredible with 10 strikeouts. By the way, from there, Alex Vesia, a scoreless inning. Blake Trinan, he gives up a run in a 3rd of an inning, but Anthony Banda, he was able to come in, hold down the fort for a pair of outside the bullpen scoreless. Roki Sasaki, a scoreless inning, and Jose Quintana gave up 3 runs in the 1st inning, including one of those home runs to Shohei Ohtani. He had no shot in this one. Chad Patrick in long relief did give up a home run to Ohtani that I think that went like 470 some odd feet or something like that. I don't know if it's landed yet, but he was relatively solid. And then Trevor McGill gives up the 3rd of those home runs to Shohei Ohtani and run allowed in an inning. Jared Koenig, he pitched a scoreless inning, but For the Brewers, their season is all over, and for the Milwaukee Brewers, they were unable to muster a lot of offense as all 4 games in this NLCS went under the total. You've got right now home teams really struggling between the ALCS and the NLCS. Just 3 wins out of the 9 total games between the NLCS and the ALCS, and all the overs have been out there on the American League side of things. So that's what we're seeing in baseball right now, and that's what we're all getting in terms of these baseball playoffs coming next. Like I said, only a 2-part podcast today because we don't have any games for Saturday thanks to the Milwaukee Brewers not getting the job done. We're going to chat with Tanner Kern about what we're seeing in the postseason. Can anyone shut down / stop the LA Dodgers, and so much more right here on the Baseball Betting Show with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the VC Family Podcast.
Breaking down every game, every day in Major League Baseball. This is the Baseball Betting Show. Here is your host, Greg Peterson.
And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for the Baseball Betting Show with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the Visa Family Podcast. Always great to be joined by this man as we've got Tanner Kern aboard. He does such an amazing job over at DraftKings, taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of baseball. And he's really got his finger on the pulse of a little bit of everything. NBA is starting to come back into our lives. I know that he does a great job there. I know that he's very dialed into everything that we're seeing on the football front as well. You're able to follow him on Twitter /X at his first and last name, Tanner Kern. Kern spelled Kern, and then an underscore after that. And Tanner, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
Thank you for joining me, Tanner. And Tanner, as we are doing this, we do not know if the Brewers were able to extend things to a Game 5 or if the Dodgers just clean swept, but I think we're both in agreement. If the Milwaukee Brewers actually won this series, it would be the greatest comeback in the history of baseball. And now that leads to the question, can either team in the American League slow down the LA Dodgers, who just have really ripped through the playoffs thus far?
I don't think so, Greg. I mean, this Dodgers team looks better than last year, and they rolled through the playoffs once they did get to the World Series last season. So I'm a little concerned with the just overall quality of either the Blue Jays or the Mariners team relative to the Dodgers. We knew the Dodgers were good coming into the postseason. I think they've gone to another level. They kind of treated the regular season almost like an NBA team that's really good. The NBA regular season doesn't necessarily matter a lot of the time for these really good teams. Once they get in, they tend to turn it up in the postseason. We've seen that with the Dodgers. They've taken it to a whole nother level. I think the biggest critique of Los Angeles coming into the season this year was the fact that, their pitchers are getting injured and they're not going to have pitching, and that's been their Achilles heel in the past. This year, it has not been. I mean, they have really good starters coming out. Just the fact that you have Yamamoto and Tyler Glasnow coming out 1-2 has been tremendous for them. You got Shohei Ohtani as well. He's been awesome. It's really hard to beat this team. I don't know how to do it. I don't know if any of these teams have the capability of doing it. They need to play perfect baseball. They need to hit home runs, and they need to consistently put the ball in play to have a chance against the Dodgers.
Yeah, with the LA Dodgers, it is going to be tough for either team in terms of the Seattle Mariners or the Blue Jays to be able to dethrone them. And I'm so glad that you mentioned the pitching of the LA Dodgers. Just how big is it that it feels like they're as healthy as they have been all season long? Because with the Dodgers, they weren't even the 1 seed in the National League. It's actually the Brewers that have home field advantage for the NLCS. But with the Dodgers, it just felt like they had a whole bunch of guys banged up. And now that you've got a full allotment of guys like Blake Snell and company back and being able to put guys like Emmett Sheehan and Clayton Kershaw in the bullpen, I just think, for lack of a better term, makes the bad guys more bad.
Yeah, I mean, you didn't really need pitching in the regular season. That's why you spend so much money on a roster. It's because you have offense that can carry you. You have enough pitching to get through. They gave away my good old friend Dustin May to the Boston Red Sox this year. Obviously, getting rid of him helped them. But, just from a pitching perspective, the Dodgers are stacked. They're healthy now, too, and everything is really coming together for them. And don't get me wrong, there's been moments where teams have had chances in this series. You look at how the Philly series concluded there. That was just ultimately a mistake by the pitcher. You look at the Milwaukee Brewers, if we're one hit by pitch away from Brewers having to win in this series, and then you just never know what's going to happen after that. But when you're rolling out Yoshinobu Yamamoto, Shohei Ohtani, Blake Snell, Tyler Glasnow, that's a really hard starting rotation to beat. Combine it with the fact that Shohei Ohtani offensively has barely put the ball in play in the playoffs, and they are still dominating everyone. So across the board, top to bottom, pitching, offense, it doesn't matter. The Dodgers are better everywhere.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I do think that with the LA Dodgers, this is the most dominant team in all baseball right now, and they very much have been showing it here in the postseason. As Tanner Kern, he does a dominant job himself. He does amazing work over at DraftKings. He joins me right here on the Baseball Betting Show, and we'll dive a little bit more into that Blue Jays versus Mariners game in a minute. But out of those two teams, obviously, I don't think we think either team will be able to get the job done. But who do you think would be able to give the Dodgers a little bit of a better series between the Mariners and the Blue Jays?
Well, it's baseball. Anything can happen, right? I think on paper and just how the Dodgers are playing right now, it's going to be really hard to beat them. But again, anything can happen in baseball. Seattle came out, looked really good in games 1 and 2, found a way to dominate those, especially in a short pitching situation in game 1 with Bryce Miller on the mound. And, he was tremendous after he gave up the first pitch home run. But I have to lean towards the Toronto Blue Jays. I think the Seattle Mariners did a lot of good things at the trade deadline. Obviously, they have a really deep lineup, but I don't know if you felt this way, Greg, but I feel like the Mariners haven't even hit their potential. It just never really came for them. Obviously, they have put together good nights, but overall, this has not been the dominant team that I thought they would be when they made all the acquisitions at the trade deadline. I think Toronto, being 54-27 at home this season, that's a really good number for them. That 94 wins overall. A team that consistently puts the ball in play, doesn't strike out a ton, has some power there with guys like Springer and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I think they're set up a little bit better. Now, if you could take the Seattle Mariners pitching and put it with the Blue Jays, I think that would be a really dominant team. But I'll take the Blue Jays just because of how they play offense, the fact that they're really good at home. And, we saw it in games 3 and 4 when they had to turn it up and the pressure was on, they were able to do it. So I think that's another quality that's going to be really helpful going against the Dodgers.
Yep, I do think that is going to be able to help them out quite a bit as well. And for the Blue Jays, you mentioned that offense going into the game on Friday, averaging 5.6 runs per game ever since the All-Star break. That is number 1 in all baseball. That's even more than what the LA Dodgers have been able to do in that time span as well. So that has been big for them. And we are currently doing this as we don't know the result of game number 5. And game 6 is going to be on Sunday. We will actually be getting a game 6. Probably might be the last game that we might be getting here before the World Series. But that said, we do know that it's going to be Trey Savage who's going to be going for the Toronto Blue Jays. For the Seattle Mariners, you have to think that they run it back from game number 2 with Logan Gilbert. How would you be looking at things going back to Toronto, where the Blue Jays lost both of those games, but you could tell that with the Seattle Mariners, they were maybe playing above their heads a little bit with regards to pitching, and I would expect the Blue Jays, when they do get back home, to be able to get that offense going once again.
Yeah, it comes down to hitting the baseball. I mean, the Blue Jays depth is so good offensively, and again, they put the ball in play consistently, so it was really surprising to see what they did in the first 2 games overall. I would probably lean towards the Blue Jays in that spot. I just think, better team coming back home where they've been really good this season. Seattle, it's amazing how much a series can flip in a couple games, right? Mariners up 2-0, they look great. They won those 2 games without a lot of pitching support just because of, what they had to go through in that 15-16 inning game to get there. But the Blue Jays, offensively, just loaded, returning home in a spot where, pending Seattle gets the job done, obviously we're recording before, but I can't see Seattle getting swept at home. Blue Jays down a game coming into a pivotal game 6. I would give them the edge there to win it. But again, I think my bet will be determined a lot off what happens in, game 5, what happens with the pitching, the bullpen, the offenses, because that all goes together. These offenses and pitching staff seem to flow in game to game, and you got to consider what happens with the bullpen heading into a pivotal game 6 when everything's on the line.
Yeah, going to be helpful that these two teams are going to be able to get a day off to be able to travel up north of the border, but still, it is going to be very important to be taking a look at that, and it is not confirmed yet whether or not Logan Gilbert will be going in that game 6. You'd have to assume that he'd be going out there, but the Mariners, I assumed, were going to be pitching Brian Wu at some point in the postseason as well, and he has not started thus far, so there's that aspect of things, and I'm so glad that you did mention the fact that the Mariners dropped both games at home, because it's been weird here in the NLCS and the ALCS. Going into the day on Friday, home teams were just 1-6 on the money line, with that lone win being the Dodgers' Game 3 win against the Milwaukee Brewers. What have you made out of the road teams just being able to take all these games here in this round of the postseason?
I mean, it kind of comes down to talent, right? Like, I think the Seattle Mariners and Toronto Blue Jays series is a little bit more different just because of the fact that I did think the Blue Jays were set up really well to win those games. But yeah, I look at the Brewers and winning the one overall seed. It really doesn't matter. Like, good teams are going to find ways to win and dominate. And the Dodgers have a really good roster. It doesn't matter if they're at home or on the road. You know, we saw it with the Philadelphia Phillies and the Dodgers. Like, the Dodgers rolled into Philadelphia, won those games with these. So this is just a spot where I think away teams that are better on paper, and there's been a lot, there's a lot of teams that just don't peak till the playoffs or, have injuries and people come back for the playoffs. Like, better teams are going to win. So, home field, it's not as critical in baseball as it is in other sports. And that's what I've just come to realize, right? A road team can win in baseball on any given night because at least you're not dealing with crowd noise. You're dealing with a little more pressure, but it's not like a football or something where, you need to communicate plays and all that. So road teams have been more talented overall.
And we both know the ultimate home court / home field advantage, college basketball as well. Not quite that as well. And Tanner, I do want to get your thoughts on this as well, because we are doing this as we don't know if we're going to get a game 5 between the Brewers and the Dodgers. I certainly hope so, but man, the Brewers, they are just completely outgunned there. But have there been any bets that you've been placing here in the postseason that maybe you wouldn't more towards the regular season, or has your game-to-game betting here in the MLB playoffs been relatively status quo?
Relatively status quo. I've been really big on series spreads. Haven't had a ton of luck with them, but I really do enjoy series spreads, especially when you get a team going down a game. Like, Blue Jays, you could get them plus 1.5 or plus 270. And, right now that bet looks really good. They got 2 games, they win 1. That's going to hit there. So I did take that. I also took the Brewers series spread when they went down a game. So I think that one's probably cooked at this point. But yeah, series spreads have been really big. I've been sprinkling some props, most home runs per series. Those have been fun as well. But really going game to game, I think there's been really good value in teams down 0-2 in series throughout the playoffs for me. Obviously the Brewers, that was not the case for them. I thought they were going to have a good night yesterday, but teams that have their backs against the wall in the playoffs have delivered. I go back to that Phillies-Dodgers series when the Phillies had to come out and hit in game 3. They were able to do it. The bats kind of shut down throughout the rest of the series, but teams with their backs against the wall has been really good for me on a money line perspective.
Yep, no question about it. And Tanner, I do think that we are going to be in for a great World Series regardless of what we get. I have to think we're going to get the Dodgers versus someone out there in the American League. You've been doing a great job covering the great game of baseball season long, but I know you're getting set for a great NBA season. You're doing tremendous work in football. You, much like myself, love some college basketball too. So let the good people at home know it's all on tap for you and how people are able to follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, just a big sports fan, so love it all, and we're entering a really good time of the sports calendar, which is great. But yeah, you can find me at Tanner Kern pretty much on every social platform, or at Tanner Kern _. I'm on the DraftKings Sportsbook pages every single day, and then my podcast, Ride the Line with Grant Mitchell, that is on Tuesdays and Fridays where you get your podcast, and then just on our YouTube channel, Ride the Line.
And Tanner, he does such an incredible job taking a look at pretty much everything out there in the sports world. If it's a sport that you're able to bet on, he's probably breaking it down. He even did a little bit of work for the hot dog eating contest during the 4th of July. So always appreciate Tanner. Big thanks to him for joining me right here on the Baseball Betting Show, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. And if you do like hearing from this fine podcast, the Baseball Betting Show, you're able to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one of 2 ways to be able to fire those in. First one is my Twitter /X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated, and then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And every single day that we have games, I'm going to be with you guys on this podcast. I'll try to keep things going as much daily as humanly possible. There might be a day or two where I don't do one in the lead up from the NLCS / the ALCS into the World Series, just because we might be getting quite a bit of a break in there, but I will still be keeping things going. We're going to go all the way through the World Series, and then once this season ends, that means that the college basketball season starts up. So for all of you that are fans of the podcast I do, the Coast to Coast Hoops podcast, be on the lookout there, as that actually has been going for 2,150 straight days and counting. So we never give up there, and we never give up trying to be able to make you guys some money on this baseball podcast. So I'll be with you guys once again tomorrow for Game 6 of the Seattle Mariners and the Blue Jays right here on the Baseball Betting Show. Myself, Craig Peterson, now a part of the VSiN family of podcasts.